Do you think this data that was released this week is the biggest breakthrough research this industry has ever experienced so far? Hey everyone, welcome to our latest TDR Psychedelic Exclusive. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Last week we had Doug Drysdale on, the CEO of Cybin, and talked about some of the updates that were going on and what we could anticipate as far as some of these results and if they could be promising related to their phase 2. Well, guess what? Data came out and we're 7 days later, and we welcome him back to the podcast. He is, like I said, the CEO of Cybin, which trades on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol CYBN and on CBO. A lot of viewers last week were saying, make sure we mention CBO as well, CYBN as well. But Doug Drysdale, good to see you 7 days later. Man, what a week it's been for you. Incredible results. Congrats to you and the team.
Yeah, thank you, Shad. Look, thanks for having me back on again. Look, we couldn't be more thrilled. This has been over 3 years in the making. Lots of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. So it's good to finally see some results, and especially results that are so compelling as well.
Yeah, Benjamin A. Smith, good to see you as well as you join me on the podcast, because I know psychedelics is your thing and you like to study research. So you know what? I'll hand things over to you, Ben, because I know there's a few things that you really noticed and highlighted based on the results. So fire away, because I think there's some really compelling data that we need to understand a little bit more, because it all looks great and sounds great.
Yeah, Doug, obviously the results came in, your interim results for CYB003, the psilocybin compound that you've been working on, highly anticipated results. And they produced some excellent reduction in the MATTER scale, which is sort of the standardized scale that is used in clinical trial research for depressive disorders. So I noticed that they were, it reduced over 14 points with the 12 milligram dose. And then I went back to Compass when they released results, and they were just over about 6 on a 25 milligram dose, 3 weeks apart. So, there's some comparative things there. I was wondering if you could explain more about that and why the difference between both compounds.
Mm-hmm.
Well, good question. Well, look, first of all, we've been working from the outset to optimize the molecule and the treatment regimen. So we didn't just plow ahead with a generic molecule. We decided that we wanted to optimize it. The deuteration definitely appears to be having an impact on potency. We're seeing that with deuterated DMT as well, some effects at lower doses. But we've also taken the opportunity to push the dose up. So we were seeing really robust psychedelic effects at 8 milligrams. And we've pushed the dose in this study all the way up to 16. So we really wanted to try and get as many people across the line as possible. And then, of course, we're giving 2 doses as well, ultimately, in this study. So we'll have a look at the difference between 1 dose and 2 doses. So we've, from the outset, worked to optimize. So I'm not surprised to see that the results are great. Were we expecting 14 points? No, probably not. But that's also an innovative and novel finding in itself, right? Is that determining the actual potency. I was going to say, the head-to-head comparison thing is a little bit difficult. There are definitely some similarities between our study and the COMP360 study, in that the baseline MADRS scores in both groups were around 33. So the severity of their depressed patients was about the same as ours. They were using an active placebo, 1 milligrams. And if you think about it, we had an active placebo because the placebo arm and both arms actually were still taking their SSRIs. So we had to show that we were better than SSRIs. But there are some differences, and I need to be fair on that. Compass was studying treatment-resistant depression patients. They titrated their patients down off their SSRIs. Who knows what kind of impact that would make. But look, overall, we're thrilled. I mean, what we're really looking for here was a really strong proof of concept, convincing data to take us into phase 3, and that's exactly what we have.
Do you think this data that was released this week is the biggest breakthrough research this industry has ever experienced so far?
I think it's the biggest breakthrough in psychiatric pharmacology in 40 years. Absolutely.
That big. Yeah. Wow. That's a statement.
Wow, that is quite a statement.
That's a huge statement.
And you're not talking about just psychedelics. You're talking about in psychology.
I'm talking about look at all of the drugs for depression that have been approved over the last few decades, and there's nothing that is like this. We're talking about a massive change, a rapid change in depressive symptoms after just a single dose. Most other treatments are chronic with chronic daily side effects. So this is a
Yeah.
big, massive breakthrough. It really is.
Yeah, and I think when I hear that, it's like, let's kind of remove that word psychedelics. This is all about mental health, and this is the whole reason why we're here, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. We get bogged down in comparing with other psychedelic molecules, and that's fine. But let's face it, all of the psychedelic molecules that have delivered data so far are impressive when they're compared
Yeah,
to current standard of
yeah,
care.
yeah. Last week I talked to you and I asked some specific questions, biotech analysts, and what they look for, and they really dissect, and they're a little skeptical on what could this actually be realistic. They like to probe you with a lot of hard questions. Have you had discussions with some analysts this week based on some of the results? If so, like what's been some of the feedback that they provided?
Yeah, well, like you guys, the feedback has been tremendous. I think quite shocking, actually. I don't think anyone
Shocking, really.
really, those are the kind of words that we're hearing. Even honestly, one of our advisors, Tom Loughran, who headed up FDA psychiatry for 27 years, that was the word he used when he saw the data, that it was shocking. So it's great to hear that from a regulator. But similarly from the analysts, we've been a show me story for a while. We've been doing all this research and work in the background, but at the end of the day, it comes down to data, and it is very rewarding to be able to deliver data like this that's so compelling.
Yeah, I would think. Shocking, it's a big word.
Now,
Steve
now,
Cohen, as we
Doug,
said, go ahead, Ben.
yeah, I just want to follow up on that. What you said earlier about the higher dose. So this was all done in the 12 milligram dose. The 16 milligram dose has not been done yet. You mentioned that there's going to be a second dose involved. So obviously you cannot talk about the results until they're published, of course. But is it possible that more robust results could be forthcoming with a higher dose and the second dose? Would that be realistic as an extension to believe that the results could possibly get better?
Yeah, look, first of all, I think it's important for people to remember this is just interim data, and we do have a full data readout, top line readout, probably around the end of November, early December. So there's still more to come from this story and from this study. We'll also have 3-month data, 12-week data coming in Q1 as well. So two more bites at the apple here. There's still more data to come. Will,
Interesting.
will we see an improvement at 16 milligrams? It's hard to say. The 12 milligram results are pretty stunning. And so we know we've got an effective dose. Could we realistically expect to see a higher level of efficacy with 16 milligrams? Maybe, but I don't know. It's pretty impressive. What we might see, though, from the 2 doses is an increase in responders, an increase in remitters. Some people just don't make it across the line with the first dose. Either they're anxious or they're fearful or they're just kind of fighting it. But the first dose sometimes becomes a really good preparation for the second dose. So I'm hoping
Yeah.
that as we look at the second dose data, we'll not only get more people over the line responding and remitting, but more people extending the durability of effect. I mean, ultimately, we'd like to see the benefits out to months, not weeks.
So that's a
Yeah.
good point. So what you're saying is that even if the effect is the same net, if more people get over the line, then the efficacy rate could actually go up because more people are ready for it, or they're expected, like they know what the experience feels like from the first time.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And we knew looking at the most impressive academic studies with psychedelics typically use 2 doses, and that's because psilocybin's a bit wavy. Right? People are a bit in and out of the experience. Not like DMT where it's a full-on experience that you can't really resist. And so, giving that second dose, if we can just lock in the benefits for more people and lock it in for longer, then why not? Right?
Interesting stuff to say the least. It's a good time. The whole sector needs it because when I look at these stocks a week later and everything still continues to hit hard. And again, you're trending in the right direction. And full disclosure, you are a client of ours. I do have a position in the company and I don't want to pump this over up, but the facts are facts. The data is data, but it's got to be a pleasant feeling to know the data that you're producing. And as I said last week, no longer being like that little soccer league game where like a whole crowd just follows one ball. Again, it's like the narrative that you're building is like really diving into your own lane. And I think, what I was going to ask actually earlier, Steve Cohen, as I said last week, bought 18.95 million shares back in September. Do you have any kind of relationship with him? Like, have you reached out to him? Has he contacted you from the results that were published this week? If so, like, what was his reaction?
Yeah, so we obviously have a contacts and relationship with the fund, with Point 72 Asset Management. They're big supporters, which is great to see.
Yeah.
We're very grateful for that. Look, it's great to see the stock up 93% year to date, which is a big number, but obviously it was down at a pretty low point like most of the sector, but good to see it rebounding. I think the rebounding is coming from differentiation, combination of the small pharma acquisition, which really solidifies our pipeline. We've got a much more differentiated pipeline than any other company in the sector. And this differentiation of this molecule with the deuteration. I think people are starting to see that we can really execute.
Yeah.
Now, Doug, I know you don't comment on stock price, and nor should you, being the CEO of this company, but have you stopped and think how mind-blowing it is that although that about the post reaction from the results? Like, where I'm getting at is if AstraZeneca or Pfizer, if Big Pharma actually produced this data, the market cap probably would have went up 1 or 2 billion just on that. I mean, these were incredible numbers, and yet, the reaction was fairly subdued. Of course, he ran before the results came up, but do you ever get a chuckle of where the sector's at right now, and just people maybe not getting the gravity of the actual results that are presented?
Yeah, like some of those things you're saying there are relevant. Yes, there was a bit of a run up beforehand, but that was really off of the small pharma acquisition. Good to see some positive reaction here, but you always get selling off on news. And so you see a kind of a run up and then a sell off and then it runs back up again.
Yeah.
I think this isn't just about one release of data. We'll keep telling the story. We'll keep releasing more data from the study. There's more to come. And of course, as well as all the further readouts from this study, we've got phase 1 data from our deuterated DMT programs coming. We'll have a phase 2 study beginning with that program as well. There's a lot of catalysts coming. So it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. But you're right. I mean, my view is that the current market cap of $200 million for assets that could peak at $3, $4, $5 billion is kind of insane. It's obviously, I think it's a big opportunity. When I look at the data and I look at how this product has performed, I think about Abilify, which is aripiprazole. That was the last treatment that was approved for adjunctive therapy with SSRIs, which is what we're trying to position CYB3 for. And that had peak sales of $6 or $7 billion. So, we've got a couple of assets here that are really very valuable.
Yeah. Well,
and that's annualized, of course, not total.
Annually.
For our viewers.
Every year, yeah.
Well, what's Spravato's numbers? They're forecast to do, is it 450 million this year?
Yeah, they're on a run rate of about 700 million this year.
Oh, is it 7?
Yeah, about 720, something like that, based on last quarter. But each quarter is getting bigger than the last, so it's ramping.
It is.
It's not linear. Next year will be $1 billion in revenues.
That's actually a good point. Doug, I know they're different compounds, but do you view ketamine at all as sort of a competitor to psilocybin compound, whatever comes out, whether it's your compound or somebody else's? Like, is that competitor because ketamine does help, some of the same symptoms, or are they two separate entities?
I see esketamine or Spravato as proof of concept, right? So if we're seeing this level of demand for a sort of intermittent antidepressant, what that requires people to go to clinics to be dosed. That's very similar to psychedelics, right? Now, the difference is that Spravato requires 8 visits to a clinic in the first 2 months, at least 16 hours. That's a lot of inconvenience. And despite that inconvenience, they're still on track to be $1 billion product next year. So if that's the case with Spravato, that has maybe an average point change versus the MADRS of 3 or so, if we can deliver anything near what we saw in this phase 2 study with a 1 and done or 2 and done treatment for folks, then the sky's the limit, I think.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think it's important to share too, like, as we try to look at these compounds and different research that's being done, like on the market right now, like how many different SSRI drugs are there? There's tons. And I think, there's plenty of research that's being done, and one drug doesn't fix all. And I think that's what people are starting to learn and understand more pertaining to the industry. Would you not agree with that?
Yeah, look, I think we've kind of settled for SSRIs for a long time. They were a breakthrough 30, 35 years ago, and then all became generic. And so they've got lots of choice. Doctors can switch from one to another. They're cheap and they're relatively safe. And
Yeah.
so, for companies to come along and develop something better, they've got to be dramatically better in order to be able to compete with that. But let's not forget that 2-point change that you see with SSRIs on average from 230 studies is pretty minimal. I mean, 2 points, when you're starting with a baseline of 33, a 2-point reduction is really pretty minimal. And there was a very large meta-analysis done called the STAR-D study that looked at all SSRIs, and they found that for mild to moderate depression, over the long term, SSRIs were no better than placebo.
Yeah.
So we know that. And then patients have a 20 to 30% chance of sexual dysfunction, which persists after they stop taking the drug, weight gain, which often they need to take other medications for, insomnia, same thing, cognitive
I
effect.
know.
And I don't think I've ever spoken to anyone on an SSRI that is happy with it. It may be blunting their depression, but it blunts everything else as well. So most people can't wait to get off of their SSRI. I know they help some people. I'm not saying they're not valuable. They are to a lot of people, but there's lots of room for improvement, I think, and that's what drives us.
Doug, they were unveiled in the 1980s. Like, I think people sometimes forget the same amount of time between 1983 and 2023 is 1943 to 1983. Like, when you put into that perspective,
Yeah.
a lot's changed, right? And I think they served its point. But, to your point, the data that's being produced is groundbreaking, and it is a lot more effective, which is why, this could be, as I've always said, could be the greatest invention of the 21st century. It really could. Last thing I want to leave, and I know I mentioned this, the 2 announcements that you have coming up later this month. If everything goes well, we then segue into a phase 3, not cheap. When I look at Compass Pathways and their phase 2 results back in the summer, they had 8 or 9 sophisticated investors. The share purchase agreement was north of $250 million when you factor in all the warrants. I would think, based on the results, you are getting a lot of interest right now amongst people to advance these trials, because this is obviously going to cost a lot of money. But most importantly, I would think the interest level is very high right now.
It is. We're getting a lot of interest, a lot of incoming interest, both from financial investors, but also strategic partners as well. I mean, as I said, it's all been about a bit of a show me story. Everyone's been interested, but now the data's there, and that's generating a lot of interest. Look, I will say that I think we have a very efficient phase 3 program planned. 220 patients in our first study, and based upon the efficiency of this molecule, it does mean we keep the numbers relatively low. So it's not a super expensive phase 3, and we plan to run alongside that a phase 2 for our DMT program as well. We'll have 4 studies running next year. That's the plan.
What would be
Other
the
than that-
interim finish on that? I know it's kind of early before you go through all the trial design, but when do you expect that would be completed if that went to phase 3?
Yeah, that phase 3 study current draft plan is runs for about 18 to 24 months. It really just depends upon recruiting rates, but broadly in that kind of range.
Okay, so data sometime, preliminarily speaking, first half of 2027, in that range?
Oh, no. We'll be starting recruiting by end of first quarter 24. So, we'll be talking, 2 years from there at the outside.
Time flies, that's for sure. 1 minute we were on a boat. It was 2 years ago, and here we are today. Listen, congrats, great work. I know the whole team has done a lot of hard work, but definitely turning into more and more believers, that's for sure, because you have a great idea, and the only way that everyone's going to believe you is you actually execute it, and that's exactly what you guys did this week. So listen, appreciate you checking in. I know you're busy, as I always say, and let's please keep in touch, and again, congrats.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on again.
Doug.
Take care.
Thanks, Doug.
What is up, everyone? What'd you think of the video? Leave a comment below. And as usual, if you want to subscribe to our channel, then click on the link here. If you want to see more videos like this, then click on the link here. As usual, click on that bell right below us to get all the notifications, because at the end of the day, TDR sets the narrative, because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.